Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Guns Explained. I'm your host, as always, Cameron Porter. We have also, as always, a very unique, special episode for you this week. We are doing an interview with none other than Parker Martin, the infamous intern at Guns Explained. Now, unfortunately, Parker is finishing up his internship and he's going to be moving on to some bigger, better things, and he's only going to be able to contribute a couple hours a week to the show moving forward. So we're sad to see him go, but we're really excited to see what he does next. And to commemorate his exit from the show, we're going to do an interview with him to ask him some questions. So thanks for being here, Parker.
I'm glad to be here. Finally one of your special guests.
Yes. Now, you've been on the show before. You helped us clean a rifle.
Yep.
Last week, you got your butt totally handed to you by me and Nate in the shootout. Okay, that's revisionist history. Technically, only Nate kicked his butt. He beat me. But this is our first chance to really get at what makes you tick. So my first question, Parker, would be, what's the most common misconception about firearms that you encounter?
I think primarily the biggest misconception that I've seen is just the lack of education. I think people look at something on a much broader spectrum than what it actually is, and they take the whole topic of firearms or gun control or anything of that nature, and they don't necessarily have the full educational prowess to look onto those topics and talk about it in a conversational or constructive way. And so I think just adding to the education and properly informing yourself about them can change the whole scope of a conversation.
Really? So you would say, so in other words, you're saying that the most common misconception really is just vocabulary.
Not only just the vocabulary changes the way of the conversation, but I also think misrepresentation in film, television, anything of that nature, and just kind of hearing negative stereotypes involving the gun community or firearms in general. I mean, I'm not your stereotypical gun owner. I own 7 guns, and I don't use any of them for personal protection. I mean, I have a hunting rifle, and the others are really just for target shooting in the desert, like what we did last week.
Wow. And I'm kind of the exact opposite. I just barely last year bought my second firearm. And I use them, I haven't used them, but I have them in preparation in case something were to happen in which I would need to defend myself and my family. So it's interesting that difference there. So if you could point out maybe the top 3 most important things for everyone to understand about firearms, what would you say that they are?
The top 3, let's see, I would say the processes of purchasing a firearm. I think a lot of people think that you can just walk in any store and walk out with a gun like you would a bag of flour. And in certain states like Utah, that might be the case. But there are states like California, New York, Connecticut, where there's a process you have to go through. And no matter where you buy it, though, you're still getting a background check. You're still getting the proper vetting to make sure that you are legally able to own that gun. The second, I would say, is probably the misuse of terminology. Vocabulary alike. Even simple things, clip to magazine, silencer, suppressor. I mean, a word can have so much more meaning than what it actually is, So a suppressor that you put on a rifle doesn't silence the weapon. It just suppresses it. So I think, again, the proper terminology and vocabulary is a push in the right direction. And third, I would say just proper training and knowing the basics of a firearm should be universal, whether you have a firearm or not. I think as long as you know the safety precautions involved with a firearm, it can have loads of information in the future for helping you understand the conversation. A gun doesn't shoot on its own. It's not going to fire on its own. So recognizing that responsible people with proper training or even just education can rightfully own and operate a firearm without it being some kind of criminal act, I think that's key.
I see. So a lot of, I like what you mentioned a little bit ago about the misrepresentation of firearms in Hollywood and in culture in general.
Yeah.
That misconception that you can just walk into any store, walk out with a firearm like a bag of flour. Like, no, there is always a background check that takes place. And, fully automatic weaponry is not available to Joe
That's another
citizen.
one. I would say, one of the big arguments against the gun community is that this AR-15 is some kind of devil weapon, you know, and one of, you know, I would say the number one misconception surrounding the AR-15 is what it stands for. Actually, you hear a lot of people call it an assault rifle, assault weapon. Assault's just a verb, you know? And so what it actually means is the Armalite Rifle 15. It's not Assault Rifle 15, it's Armalite Rifle 15. And I mean, just to buy one, it's not like it's not like you're going in and buying some machine gun that's going to be able to do mass amounts of damage. It's a semi-automatic rifle, just like any Ruger 1022 is.
And really any handgun, any modern handgun.
Absolutely.
Semi-automatic. Well, thank you, Parker. Are there any parting words that you have for your audience? No profanity, please.
I would say learn about your guns, learn how to use them, and learn how to properly care for them. And most importantly, don't give the gun community a bad rep. Follow the rules like you're supposed to, and we won't have this sort of negative connotation attached to us when we bring up this in conversation.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much, Parker.
Absolutely.
We loved having you on the show and hope to be able to work with you some more.
I can't wait.
So thanks. Thank you, everybody, for watching this episode. Also want to send a shout out to our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for helping make every episode of Guns Explained possible. We will see you next week with another fantastic episode. That episode rocked. If you want to rock too, like our Facebook page and subscribe on Patreon to help support more episodes. Have a good day.